Tropical temperatures across a brown and blazing land. The heart of England, today hotter than the Caribbean and Western Sahara. Have you got nice memories of going to the beach then?
I went on a donkey when I was about 8 years old.
Did you? Do you still remember that?
Yeah.
Elaine Ward and her friends were keeping cool at their care home in Nottinghamshire. Do you enjoy the sun?
Yeah, I think when you get older you can't tolerate it as much as what you can when you're young, you know.
We've got the fans to cool the air and circulate the air. We've purchased more ice creams and ice lollies and that type of thing.
Just some of the measures the manager has in place to help look after the 54 residents, some of whom have dementia. So it's a bit of a worry trying to keep everyone cool.
Yeah, keeping everybody cool, trying to dissuade them from going outside and into the direct sun.
Nottinghamshire is forecast to see a record 41 degrees by tomorrow. Angie Hallam's father was in the army, and so she spent a childhood living across Europe. And you think they cope better with the heat there?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Do you think we complain too much here?
Yeah.
Straight talking.
Yeah, it's never right. It's either too wet or too hot.
They weren't quite sure what to make of these homemade frozen fruits at the city's Stonebridge farm.
It's quite stressful in ensuring that they've got everything they need, but also making sure that they're not getting too hot.
It's the first time the Met Office has issued a red extreme heat warning, which saw a widespread impact on people and animals and infrastructure.
This weather is absolutely unprecedented. We have never seen anything like these temperatures in our models before. So the highest temperature we've ever recorded in the UK is 38.7 in 2019. We are seeing a higher than 90% chance of breaking that temperature, if not today, then tomorrow.
Across the country, playgrounds were peaceful, as students sheltered in the shade.
The heat is so hot, we could easily get overheated and probably get sunburn. So that's why I had to stay inside, so it's safer.
It's way too hot to go outside. Even if you go in the shade, it would still be too hot.
Schools weren't ordered to close, although some did. Instead, the government asked head teachers to make sure pupils were safe and comfortable.
We always want school to be open wherever possible, so I think the arrangements we've made today means that children are happy and safe and they're in school.
This is due to severe weather.
While they were in school, some parents and commuters struggled to get to work. Network Rail had asked people to travel only if absolutely necessary. There were some cancellations and speed restrictions along many lines. Tomorrow, no services will run between London, Leeds and York for much of the day.
There's been a few cancellations this morning, but it's gone okay. But tomorrow all the trains cancelled from where I live.
The way I look at it is people pay good money to go abroad to get this sort of weather. We get 2 days of it over here and the whole country comes to a standstill. What does that say about us as a nation?
At Luton Airport, flights were suspended for a while after the high temperatures led to what was described as a surface defect on the runway. And if you thought today was warm, be set to swelter some more tomorrow.
Darshana Soni there, reporting from the banks of the River Trent in Nottingham. So how well has the government here in Westminster been handling the heat emergency? And is the UK in a fit state to deal with the impact? Our political reporter Serena Barker-Singh is with me now. Serena.
Well, yes, the government are keen to stress that they're clearly on top of what is a very serious situation. So they've had 3 COBRA meetings over the last couple of days. This is where they talk to public health officials like senior medical officer Chris Whitty, and they say the NHS is coping, schools and hospitals the same. But who has been noticeably absent has been the Prime Minister, and this has raised eyebrows for some because he has, for instance, attended the Farnborough Air Show today, and that's led the Leader of the Opposition to question whether the government are taking this heatwave seriously enough.
For many people today is going to be a real struggle today and tomorrow, the heat, and they are seeing a Prime Minister who's basically checked out so he's not really doing anything. And you've got a cabinet that is completely distracted with the circus of a leadership race.
It is literally my job as Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster to chair COBRA, particularly where the Civil Contingency Secretariat is involved, and then to brief the Prime Minister accordingly, which I did yesterday morning at 8 o'clock. It is my job to coordinate across the whole of government, and that is what we have been doing.
And it's not just Labour who are concerned. A cross-party committee has come out today to say that they're worried about things like buckling railroads or melting roads. And they actually say there's a hole in government because there's no minister who's responsible for what they describe as critical national infrastructure to the effects of climate change. And obviously, you know, Cathy, here in Parliament, when it's these sweltering conditions, it's not the most comfortable of places. So the issue of climate change is quite squarely on MPs' minds. Just today, there was a hustings for the next leadership, in the leadership race for the next Conservative leader, just in a room upstairs. And this is where policies of climate change were put to the future PM to kind of tease out how committed they are to the issues of climate change.
Serena, thanks very much, reporting from a rare cool spot in the Palace of Westminster. So what does all that mean for the NHS? Some hospitals are cancelling routine appointments and doctors are warning of the health risks to vulnerable people. In a moment, we'll get the latest from our health correspondent, Victoria MacDonald, who's outside University College Hospital in London. But first, for the latest on those record temperatures, I'm joined by our weather presenter, Liam Dutton, who is beside the River Thames at Runnymede in Surrey. So, Liam, tell us first, how hot has it been today?
Well, Cathy, it's been very hot across a large swathe of the UK. Temperatures across England and Wales have widely been in the mid to high 30s. And of course, Wales has had its hottest day on record. The mercury there soaring today in Hawarden in the northeast of the country to 37.1 Celsius. And that broke the old record by almost 2 degrees. It's an astounding difference to create a new record by. Now, elsewhere in the UK, the hottest place has been Santon Downham in Suffolk. The temperature there got to 38.1. Very hot, but not quite hot enough to break the current all-time maximum temperature record for the UK. That still stands at 38.7, and that was set back in July 2019 in Cambridge. But nevertheless, we still have another day of extreme heat to go tomorrow. And if anything, for eastern parts of the UK, temperatures could be a degree or so higher, so potentially getting as high as 40 or 41 degrees. Unprecedented heat here in the UK.
So when is it going to cool down, Liam?
Well, before we get to that, Cathy, let's talk about the warnings that are still in force for the rest of today and indeed into tomorrow. We'll take a look at the map. You can see England, Wales, southern and eastern parts of Scotland still orange, amber warnings covering those areas. Then you've got that higher tier red warning for London, the Midlands, into parts of the home counties and northern parts of England. And it's in the red warning area that there's the highest chance of seeing those temperatures getting to around 40 or 41 degrees tomorrow. Now, some of you may be sitting at home thinking, well, what's the big deal? You know, I've been on holiday, I've experienced 40 degrees. What's all the fuss about? Well, in the hotter countries where they get 40 degrees, they're equipped to deal with it. They have air conditioning. Their infrastructures are built to cope with these sorts of temperatures. They have swimming pools, perhaps outside in their gardens. In the UK, we just don't have that. So the next question, as you just pointed out, when is it going to cool down? Well, one more day of extreme heat, and then for Wednesday, there'll be showers and thunderstorms moving eastwards, and it will be much cooler. Some places will be 10 to 15 degrees cooler than what we'll see tomorrow. A full forecast at the end of the programme.
Thanks very much, Liam. Well, let's go now to our health correspondent, Victoria MacDonald. And Victoria, this does feel like more bad news for a health service which was already under serious pressure post-COVID.
Yes, well, yes, it is under pressure, and we were reporting that last week, and in particular the ambulance services. So contingency plans have been put in place, and it does appear that it's been working reasonably well. So NHS England asked trusts to help make sure that patients were handed over within half an hour to find extra space in the building so that they didn't have to sit in the back of hot ambulances. And that goes for the paramedics too. They need to keep cool as well. Some trusts have told us that they're making sure they have lots of bottled water in those ambulances. We've seen pictures of air conditioning units put into them as well. The other problem for trusts, of course, is that these beds are full. But they cannot discharge patients, even if they're well enough, unless they can be assured that they're going back into the community or back into a care home where they will be able to keep cool. And yet, of course, they have to clear space to get new patients. And one trust, East of England Trust, Ambulance Trust, has said they'd had 1,600 emergency calls, some of which were heat related. But they said the most important thing was that messaging: drink lots of water, stay in the shade.
Oh, Victoria, thanks very much. Let's go now to Fatima in Leeds.
Thanks, Kathy. Well, in parts of France, forecasters are calling it a heat apocalypse, with thousands of people forced to flee spreading wildfires in the country's southwest. Hundreds of deaths have already been blamed on the heat in Spain and Portugal, where temperatures hit a record 47 Celsius last week. And climate scientists say this kind of extreme weather is only going to become more common and even more intense. Well, our chief correspondent Alex Thompson joins us now from a farming estate in Suffolk. Alex.
Indeed, Fatima, and very close to Santon Downham, which of course saw the highest temperature across England today. I suspect it'll be exceeded tomorrow, either here or somewhere else, as we've been hearing. Bit of context, 2 years ago there was a similar heatwave, but not nearly as extreme temperatures. In the 3 summer months in England, 2,500 people died from heat-related causes. Now that is 6 times, more than 6 times, the number of people killed on the roads, for instance, during that time. So we came here today to West Suffolk, to this wonderful 10,000-acre estate, expecting and indeed finding stark images of farmers coping with not just these temperatures today, but weeks, indeed months of drought in this area. We certainly found those images, but another very strong message, which I didn't expect. Farmers here want 2 things. They want urgently the government to look at a national network of irrigation, a sort of national grid of water to move it round to the parts of the country of the UK where it's most needed. But they also want a quick cut in the red tape to get things like alternative energy, solar and wind power up and running fast. That's how they say we're going to adapt quickly, as we have to the climate emergency. Quick word of warning, we're also looking tonight at some of the images coming in from Western continental Europe, where people have been fighting fires, and some of those some viewers may find disturbing.
Bare, brown, parched and dead. This was supposed to be a maize field on the Euston estate in Suffolk. The farm reservoir down to its last metre of water. This will be dry by tomorrow night.
It's really got fingers crossed stage. We need more infrastructure of investment, particularly in water storage, so reservoirs, and indeed some form of interconnecting pipework between different regions of the UK would be incredibly useful.
Yeah, a network, a national grid for water.
Ideal.
On Saturday, a combine hit a flint, sparking a fire. Half the field of wheat was lost. This year, drought and extreme temperature have cut the wheat harvest by a third, a loss of at least 120,000, and they're harvesting 2 weeks earlier than normal.
Future heat waves, we definitely think, will be more frequent, they will be hotter, they will be longer, and so we'll have more of exactly this type of thing.
It's not like they're taking it lying down here. Under cultivation and irrigation, a plantation of Polonia. Non-native trees, yes, but 6 times the rate of carbon capture than that found in domestic species. Preparations too today for a 50-megawatt solar farm across 400 acres here.
And here we are, just a few fields away. They've got another system already up and running. This is what getting away from fossil fuels looks like. This is what adapting to the climate crisis feels like. There's just one problem. Science continually tells us we are running out of time to act in a climate emergency. But in the UK, to get one of these things up and running involves a mire of red tape and bureaucracy.
It's an absolute massive issue with the planners. It took fully 3 years to get the 50 megawatts consulted. The environmental reports, which are all really good, the archaeological reports, everything is absolutely exceptional. But when you've got a stack of documents, hundreds of pages deep, you do question whether there's any form of urgency that's been channeled to getting our renewable energy infrastructure built up as quickly as we need to.
Nothing is joined up across the planning system. It seems to not really take all of these things into account at the same time. It kind of goes one way and then another way. And we really need a joined up approach to sort this problem out, because it's not just heat waves, it's things like floods and storms, And also, thinking about, equity in our society and making sure that we're thinking about all the people who don't have the agency to, put a tree outside their window or move away from the floodplain.
Of course, the climate emergency is global. Zamora in Spain. Angel Arjona desperately tries to bulldoze a firebreak trench to protect his construction business from the advancing wildfire. He's engulfed in seconds, runs for his life, clothes on fire. He was helicoptered to hospital with serious burns, leaving other villagers to do what they could. Not much. Across the coastal zone of Gironde in southwest France, officials say the situation is deteriorating as fires burn out of control. At least 16,000 people moved from their homes for safety.
It all looks like this is the result of the climate change, because the trends are unmistakable. While we may have here or there, let's say, less bad year, the trends are unmistakable. We have an increased frequency and intensity of forest fires if we look over the average over the years.
Back in Suffolk, well, you get through it as best you can. The message, though, is clear here. We have to cut red tape and move faster if we are to adapt. The fire risk here is so high they need water tanks on standby for harvesting. And yet it is only today that all 5 would-be Prime Ministers have finally admitted they'll all uphold the law and deliver net zero by 2050. And before we leave you from West Suffolk, some important environmental news to pass on, which has just really become clear in the last couple of hours. A number of campaign groups have taken and won a landmark judgment at the High Court. Essentially, the judge has ruled that the entire net zero 2050 strategy of the government is unlawful. Now, it boils in its complexity to 2 strands. One, whilst the government says, oh yes, we're going to reach net zero and we're the first country to do it, they're very quick to say that, they haven't costed and effectively set out the fine print and the detail as to how they're going to deliver what is a legal obligation, do not forget. Moreover, the judgment appears to say that they have in effect kept both the public and Parliament in the dark about that failing. This means, of course, that whoever becomes the next Prime Minister, and none of them appear full-throated enthusiasts for net zero, we might say, they've got a pretty full in tray, and barring a successful appeal, the government is going to have to look at how it really does deliver what the law says, net zero by 2050. Back to you.
Alex Thompson there. Well, joining me now is Rosa Foster, the co-director of the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission, and she leads the region's climate emergency response for the Environment Agency. Thanks for coming in, Rosa. All of the warnings about climate change are now coming true. We're feeling it. Have we done enough?
The simple answer, I think, is not yet, but we know what the solutions are. We just need to prioritise investing in them and planning and incorporating it into our work. And by our work, I mean everyone, all of our, everybody has a role to play on adapting and becoming resilient to climate change. So encourage people to really think about and learn from this event and from recent flood events and the prolonged dry weather to really understand, like, what does this mean for them, for their livelihoods and how they approach this.
So what does adapting to more heat waves actually look like in the UK? Is it just about getting air conditioning in?
The trouble with air conditioning, of course, is it's very carbon potentially, well, it's very electricity heavy, so therefore potentially quite carbon heavy.
And then contributing to the problem.
And then, yeah, you increase the cycle. So that's definitely something we're very aware of. I think it means really looking to some of the hotter countries around the world and understanding how their infrastructure is resilient. So how are their trains still running through these temperatures, and what can we learn and incorporate that into our infrastructure and our planning? I think one of the things that we really need to do, when you look at the Committee on Climate Change last year published a report on adaptation and made some very stark statements about our state of readiness and the fact that we are now less prepared for climate change than we were 5 years ago. I think we need to heed those warnings, and we need to, it would be fantastic if the government could commission a national, or ask Treasury to do a national review of the economics of resilience, so we can work out where investment needs to be made, how much, like understand the quantum of investment, and start to really build a strong plan for that.
But practically, what sort of thing are we looking at? Are we going to have to redesign the way we live, basically?
I think we're going to need to be able to be flexible, aren't we? The forecast, you know, the modelling and what we're living shows, you know, bigger storm events, longer, drier summers, which will change how we can use water, how we should and how we can use water. It will change the complexity and frequency of environmental incidents. So in the Environment Agency, we're doing a lot of planning to make sure that we're able to respond to that changing dynamic. Within our cities and market towns, you know, we are going to have to, I think, be prepared, like how we've adapted for these 2 or 3 days of extreme heat. We're going to need to be able to do that more frequently, and we need to be able to do it in a way that is less disruptive to daily life. So, you know, let's learn from this and make sure that we're able to do it. We can adapt to this. You know, I think that there's a lot in the news, rightly, that it's quite scary, and it is scary. But first, we need to accept what's going on, and then we can work out what we need to do about it. But we can't pretend it's not happening.
Are there places you've seen where it's working well, where they're actually thinking about climate change and the impact it's going to have, whether it's heat waves or floods or other extreme weather, where it's working well, something good that you've seen that works?
Yeah, so we're lucky in Yorkshire and Humber that we've got a number of really great examples. So in terms of flood, for example, right here in Leeds, we've got the Leeds Flood Alleviation Scheme with a really great catchment-wide approach of tree planting and working with farmers to how they aerate their soils. That's like forking the ground, so it soaks up the water better, but that is good for soil health. It's good for carbon storage in the soils, and it's also good for water quality because it keeps the nitrates and the minerals in the ground rather than flowing into the rivers. In Sheffield, there's a flagship community interest company called Green Estate. It's been working in and around what was dubbed to be one of the most deprived estates in Europe about 20, 30 years ago, and has been progressively working with the community to improve their resilience and adapt the place. So they've now got, rather than parks that were plagues and really unsafe areas, they're now green flag parks, and no doubt would have provided respite for people in quite dense housing areas. So,
Rosa, if we don't adapt, what's the reality we're looking at?
Well, it's just going to get harder, and it's going to cost a lot more money. And we're looking at the health warnings coming from the NHS and the health professionals, and ultimately some of the messages are quite stark, aren't they, around our ability, who is actually vulnerable to heat, and our ability to just carry on as normal isn't really there. It isn't going to be like this all the time, but we do need to have a hot weather plan, a very hot weather plan, and be able to click into that without it causing that disruption.
OK, I'm going to have to leave it there for now. Rosa Foster, thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.